I'm Joyce Woodworth. Welcome to the Spirit of Winona. We are currently standing in what used to be the Reinhardt Stained Glass Studio, and it is currently a cooperative art studio shared by 5 artists. Today, 2 of the artists have agreed to share with us and demonstrate how they create from glass their wonderful jewelry and dishware. This is Bernadette Mahfood, who creates beautiful jewelry. These are just some of her pieces. Hi, Bernadette. Welcome to the Spirit of Winona.
Thank you.
Your jewelry is fantastic.
Thank you.
It really is. And now I know you're going to take us through the process of making this.
Right.
But let's talk a little bit first about your studio. Now, I understand that there are 5 artists here in the studio, and you're located on West 5th Street. Tell me a little bit about some of the other artists in the studio.
Well, the exciting thing is that after Kathy Richardson put in a furnace, we now have a full glass studio. No one does, what's interesting is no one does stained glass in this studio, even though Winona is stained glass heaven.
Mm-hmm. But yet you create your jewelry out of glass.
Out of glass, right. Mm-hmm. So we have blown glass, glass that's made in a torch, which Kathy does and I do, and glass that's done in a kiln, which is what this piece is. The top is done in a kiln and the bottom is done making a bead in the torch, which I'll demonstrate later. And then we have Walken, who fuses glass and then slumps it into plates and bowls. And besides that, we have 2 fiber artists, a basket maker, Joan McNeil, and Terry Payette, who does soft sculpture boxes and does needle weaving. Okay. Yeah.
Now tell me, how do you sell your wares, your arts and crafts? How do you sell these?
Those of us that sell, not everyone sells their work, but those of us that do the glass do. And we sell our work through juried art fairs, mainly in the upper Midwest, and through fine craft galleries, all over the country, actually. Okay. Our work is sold all over the country, all 3 of us who do the glass. Wonderful. Yeah.
What about someone in Winona? How would they go about buying some of your pieces?
Oh, they can come on April 27th and 28th when we have an open studio. It's in conjunction with the Bluff Country Studio Art Tour, which is artists in all southeast Minnesota and northern Iowa. It's at 506 West 5th, and there are 25 sites and 40 artists.
Wonderful. And now tell me a little bit about your jewelry making. Tell me how you got inspired to do this, how long you've been doing it, and what it means to you.
I've been collecting glass beads and other interesting beads for about 30 years. And after holding them and working with them and putting them in jewelry, I got interested in learning how to make them. And I found someone who was a master glass worker who did sculptures using a torch. He had never made a bead. In fact, there were very few bead makers in the United States when I took the class. 1987, and I've been making glass beads ever since. In 1992, there was an exhibition and the beginning of an organization called the Society of Glass Bead Makers. There are now 1,000 members of the Society of Glass Bead Makers. It's international. Most of the bead makers in the organization are hobbyists. There are still just a few of us who actually do it from soup to nuts, from making the beads to designing the jewelry and then going out and selling our jewelry. There's still only 2 handfuls of people. So it's still a small world of bead makers.
Shall we go into the process and you can show us how you go from making a bead to crafting a lovely piece like this?
Sure. I'm using a relatively small torch. In ancient times, they actually used something that looked like, I'll call it a beehive, small beehive-looking thing with a hole in the top. The flame was in the bottom, and they worked over this small hole at the top. And then it went to something that looked like a Bunsen burner, and was made. The glass was made that way for probably 1,000 years. And so still today, people will call this technique lamp work, which means they actually worked over something that looked like a Bunsen burner. Today we have all kinds of torches And I mean, they can be this big around, depending on the size of the piece that you want to make. All of my glass, or most of my glass, actually comes from Italy, and it's made round so that I can keep turning it in my hand. One of the contemporary improvements was to go from using a copper or bronze metal rod to stainless steel rod. Neither the glass nor the stainless steel rod conduct heat very well, so that I can actually get my hand pretty close. On the outside of the metal is a wash, a kiln wash. It's made up of graphite and clay. It's put on wet and allowed to dry, and will be my working surface to build the bead, build the glass up. And I'm getting this red hot, and I guess you can see the movement of the glass. That's when I know it's ready to work. And right now it's about the consistency of fresh, soft chewing gum. 1,000 times hotter. So when it's ready, I tack it on, and I'm turning the rod in my right hand, the metal rod, and there's a bead. The longer I hold it in the flame, and I keep turning it, between gravity and the heat, it will go round. I started off with black glass. It's red because it's red hot. Now I have a little piece of white glass in my hand, and I'm going to just drop it down onto the black glass. The black glass is still very hot. When white glass is heated up, it turns transparent rather than red the way the black glass did. And you can see how close I can get my hand to this. This is still not hot. This is getting hot. Now I have a bumpy glass, bumpy bead, white dots on a black background. I can leave it like that, or heat it up some more until the white glass melts right into the black, and there it goes. So it becomes big white dots on a black background. And I'm heating it up so much it's getting out of shape. I'm going to apply a very small amount of black on the edge of the white. Now, I only do this when I haven't had much coffee. I have a steady hand. All right. So there's looks red again. See the little raised dots on the black.
You can be as creative as you want.
You can keep fooling around with this, even on something that's this small. Now I'm going to heat this up so it really melts into the back, and we get a wholly different effect. As it cools, what you can see are little crescents. When the bead is to the point where I'm satisfied with it, it's still very hot. I put it in an annealing oven.
It goes in on the rod?
It goes in on the rod. This is kept at a constant 800 and some degrees. And as I make one bead after another, I'll fill up the kiln. I don't ever fill up the kiln. I don't work that hard. After I make the beads, while they're cooling down, one of the things I do is come over and cut glass. This is glass that's similar to stained glass, only it's been tested compatible, which means that I can actually fuse this piece on top of this piece, and it will stay together and not crack each other. Glass comes in big sheets, the same as it does for stained glass, and I will cut and shape a piece of glass to make into a pin such as this. I'll have the bead made. Sometimes I make this first, sometimes I make the bead first. So the process might be something like this, where I have a little template, draw the design on the glass, and then on a good day, some days are good for cutting glass and other days aren't. I don't know why that is. So it just gets cut. You can hear the nice, whoops, sound of glass being cut. It should sound like that. I'm going to cheat and tap it a little bit because this is a pretty deep curve. And there it is. Once I've got it cut pretty far along to the point where I like it, then I have a grinder, and I'll smooth the glass out. I'll have the back and the top, and it will get stacked together.
And you fuse this together in a kiln?
And I'll put it in the kiln.
Does it just get fused together by heat, or do you have to put some type of glue between the glass?
Put a glue between the glass only to keep it together so I can get it from here to the kiln.
Okay. Does the kiln also, is that responsible for giving it the smooth, soft edge?
Right,
okay.
Right.
All
Yeah,
right. Well,
it comes out pretty straight.
Let's see how you get your design on the top of it.
So that's what all of this glass is. I will cut little pieces of glass, and this is another kind of glass that is actually sort of an enameling technique. And that design will go on there.
Can you put pieces on top of pieces?
So you can put pieces on top of pieces. This one I'm just making up as I go along here. And we'll just see.
Do you also have to put glue on these little tiny
and
pieces?
These little tiny pieces. I use a lot of tweezers. So once I have all the elements together on here and glued together, and it's dry enough to pick up, and usually I have a tray full, then I take it over to my kiln, place them in the kiln one at a time, and then turn the kiln on.
Okay.
And it takes for the glass to go from looking like this to being rounded out and it being fused together like that takes about an hour and 15 minutes. This was taken out of the kiln and a pin back glued on the back. The little hook was placed in between the two pieces of glass before it was fired, so it's ready to go. The bead was made and put on a head pin with a few other little beads here, and I pretty much use stainless steel or sterling silver findings. So I just open the hook up, hook it onto the other hook, and the pin is ready.
It's darling.
I put it on my cards that say Hot Flash Designs. Since I started this in midlife, I named my business Hot Flash Designs.
All right.
I tell people often that it was my midlife meltdown. And that's close to what was going on.
I love it.
Right.
Let me take a peek at this. Okay, now how much does a piece like this cost?
The pins range in price from about $32 to $45, depending on how complicated how complicated the bead was, how complicated the glass, the fused glass part was. And right now, yellow is a pretty popular color. It isn't always, but it is right now.
It's a beautiful piece.
Each of Bernadette's pieces is unique. As we take a closer look at some of them, she tells us about the other techniques she uses to create her jewelry.
Now these are all done with that little torch?
All of those are done with that little torch, and that is not as big as I could get.
What about this long piece here? Is that created also?
Yes.
On the torch?
No, that's done with little seed beads, which I buy, and then I have woven them onto themselves.
I see.
And this is a true bead maniac here.
Well, now this bead you obviously did on the torch,
that one I
right?
made, yes. And usually for this style necklace, I make the bead first and then design the seed bead work to go with the bead that I've made as a centerpiece.
This one seems to be quite interesting. It's kind of a square-looking bead.
Right.
This also is done on the torch?
Right.
And how, now this one looks like it has little leaves, and that is done with a little green glass?
That, the way I demonstrated the dot making before, it's the same technique, except that I took a little metal tool. I actually dragged it through the dots while it was hot. And that's how I get that little leaf shape and the flower shape. Oh, it's one of the things in the bead making world that I'm recognized for.
Now, what's going on here? This is not a bead. This is something else. Tell me about this.
It's the same techniques I used to cut glass, and I've cut strips of glass, different lengths in this case. Then with a lapidary saw, I've sliced off a piece. I will clean this up a little more than it is, put a little decorative element on it, and put it in the kiln and fire it, and it will round off. Choose some beads to go with it on either side on a sterling silver chain, and I have a pendant necklace.
And we have some lovely bracelets over here.
Right. Now, same idea. In this case, the glass, I cut the glass in the same width, stack it up as a bar. It's put in the kiln like that and fired. Then when it comes out, I cut the slices off again. They are rounded off and fired again. And in this case, I have used a sterling silver bracelet and mounted those beads on top of the bracelet with a loop on the top so that I then can hang charms. So in this case, I think I have all garden things. There's a flower and a watering can.
Now, Bernadette, we're standing here in front of all your finished products, and these are magnificent. Some of them are so creative, like this big splash of green. It looks like an artist palette or something.
Right. Well,
lovely.
the shape is artist palette, and there's a butterfly on it.
Very creative pieces. And you've got some wonderful florals.
Here's one of my favorites. A lot of people see an exploding mountain. If you look a little more, you'll see a figure, a wild woman, arms raised, hair standing straight up off her head. It's very often bought as a 50th birthday present for women.
Looking at and describing Bernadette's jewelry is sort of like taking a rake in the woods for me. I could go on forever describing each individual creative design of which she has so many. She tells me she doesn't understand what artist's block is because she has a continuous flow of ideas, all expressed in her beautiful handcrafted jewelry.
I'm standing with Joan McNeil, who is the basket weaver here at the studio. How often do you work in the studio here, Joan?
Well, as often as I can. There are some weeks where I'm here almost every day, and then depending on my schedule of my other activities, then I don't get in as often. But one thing that really is nice about having studio space is that I don't go through the process of picking up every day at home and then getting it out again. So it does save me a lot of time there.
Sure. Now, your pieces, I can see that you don't actually assemble a lot of them for sale. You do kind of one of a kind. These are real art pieces, aren't they?
Yeah. I like to experiment with the forms and the different materials. And then what I do is I enter them into shows, and they've been shown in the tri-state area, in Iowa and Wisconsin and Minnesota, in various galleries and art centers.
Tell me about some of the pieces. Now, this one is absolutely fantastic. Tell me about the materials and how you designed it and whatever.
Well, each of my baskets usually it starts as a concept, and I have to plan everything out, and then I have to calculate in how much material I'm going to need and measure the actual materials. And this was before I started working more with color, and my materials were primarily this brown of natural brown paper bag color and the white. And in fact, a lot of the materials here you'll see in shopping bags. For example, this part here is called paper fiber rush, and you'll see that in shopping bag handles and also in upholstery. It's very similar to the craft material a lot of people buy now called twisty bow.
And how about this one? Now, this one looks like you've added some paint and some shiny paper. Tell me about that one.
Okay, with this one I spray painted the actual elements first. I laid them out on the ground outside and then spray painted them with different colors, and then wove the piece together. And as I was weaving, then I took some of this metallic ribbon material and wove that in there for a striking contrast, and then finished it out with a wire-supported twisted paper material. So I'm constantly looking for new and unusual materials, and friends of mine are always saving various strange items for me to include in baskets. Well, technically they are baskets because most of them have an opening and you could put something inside them, but they really are more decorative. They're more one-of-a-kind art pieces.
They are certainly beautiful.
Thank you.
This is Terry Payat, who does soft sculpture, which is a really kind of a unique art form, Terry. And this is one of your really unique pieces. Tell us about this.
This piece is called The Great Escape. I've been told all my life, you can't do this because you're too young. You can't wear this because you're too old. And so I call this an age box, and I call it The Great Escape. There's hands here showing that this entity here is trying to escape the age box. And when you open the box, there is a mask of what portrays the age box. This part here portrays the older version of myself, and this part portrays the person that would like to escape from the box. It has a nose ring, it has an eyebrow ring, it has multicolored hair, and sometimes that's how I feel. I would just like to bust out, and especially with my artwork, is what I would like to do. So that's the age box, The Great Escape.
Okay, it's a darling piece.
Thank you.
This is Walken Matejcik, who does wonderful dishware like this. I know you do functional and you do creative dishware, right, Walken?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk a little bit first about how you got into doing this dishware.
Well, I had the privilege of meeting Bernadette Mahfood 7 years ago. And as I got to know her, the glass just became, it's such a part of her life. It became part of my life. And so little bit by little bit, I learned how to play with the glass. I started making little bowls, plates, just, she had, 'cause she had a couple molds. And then as time went on, it started getting my interest. And so now I'm doing it for a living.
Okay, now you're going to demonstrate and tell us a little bit about how you take a piece of glass and turn it into something like this. Tell me about the process.
Okay, well, first of all, I buy the glass in big sheets, and then I cut it down to a size. In this case, it's just a 4x4, but so I got a glass cut. I assemble the pieces. I glue them together. I take it to the kiln, and then the kiln does all the work. So what we're dealing with here is kiln form glass. So now all the glass pieces have been cooked ones, roughly 1500 degrees, and so the texture is smooth, and it's just one piece of glass. So now I take this piece of glass out of the kiln. I would take a mold of some sort, put it on the mold, recook it, and then the gravity, as this warms up, the gravity will pull it into the shape of the mold.
Walken lifts the kiln cover to allow the slumped dishes to begin the cooling process. The dishes have been in the 1500-degree kiln for 10 minutes, in which they have slumped down into their finished position.
So this piece here is what you'd consider fused and slumped.
Okay, and the slumping is the dip that is created.
It's taking the shape of the mold.
Okay, how many times has this piece been baked in your kiln?
Twice.
Okay, and this is the first step?
Yes.
This is the second step?
Yeah, this is assembling,
Okay.
fusing, and slumping.
Well, Walken, you've really created some beautiful pieces here. Tell us about some of these.
Well, on this one here, it's the 4 elements. It's air, water, earth, and fire.
Okay.
Most of my designs and patterns will come out of my own life. And I have been a person who loves being outdoors.
So you have a lot of the outdoors in some of your pieces. And
Yes.
this actually looks like confetti in this one. This looks more festive than the outdoors. Tell me about that one.
Well, that one, it's like the center of it is the center of my being. And all the little confettis are all the different things that happen in one's life, in the mind, in reality, the imaginative, the physical, the wide range of life experiences.
So this craft has really taken you far, from a little love interest with Bernadette into these beautiful pieces.
Yes, it's got a lot to do with self-creation, self-expression, the joy of expressing.
Well, Bernadette and Walken, I'd like to thank you both for sharing your crafts with us and the wonderful demonstrations you gave us. Your jewelry is fantastic and your dishware is very, very unique. Tell me about the studio itself, how you all came together.
I think we were at a meeting, and actually it was Walken and two of his friends that decided to come over and look at this. And I'm not sure whether they were thinking of a woodworking studio and a ceramic studio, which would have been a dust and dust. That combination didn't quite work. But Walken and the friend who uses the offices in the front started looking at it and talking about it. And I thought of Kathy Richardson. I knew that she was looking for a studio. And then the others just sort of came to us and said, we'd like to have space in there if there's space. And all of a sudden we had the right number of people and the right combination of people. Not so dusty, because none of us do anything that really creates very much dust. So it just worked. Yeah, it came together.
And it works really well. And I especially like the way the two of you work together. It sounds like you were sort of Walken's inspiration to make his glassware. Is that right?
Well, he learned how to do the glassware. His designs are his inspiration. His design, from his own creativity. Yeah, but he learned the technical stuff from me. Yeah, and he realized he tried doing jewelry, and his carpenter hands didn't really like working with little teeny pieces. He realized he needed to work with bigger pieces.
Yeah, so working with the jewelry, I found out I could work with the glass, and I liked working with the glass. So Bernadette offered me a playground, and I went and played.
Okay, well, it sounds like the two of you are having a lot of fun with your crafts and with what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This has been Joyce Woodworth. Please join me again next week. Till then, enjoy the Spirit of Winona.